My name is Brian, and I'm a 38-year-old software engineer. My wife, Jennifer, is 36 and works in marketing. We've been married for 8 years and live in a cozy apartment on the third floor of a building in a quiet neighborhood. Our life has been relatively smooth sailing, at least on the surface. We don't have kids, and we've built a comfortable life together. However, over the past few months, I've noticed a change in Jennifer. It started subtly. A shift in her demeanor, a flicker of something hidden behind her eyes. She became more distant, more guarded. At first, I chalked it up to stress from her demanding job, but the signs became harder to ignore. Jennifer began spending more time on her phone, often texting late into the night. When I asked her about it, she brushed it off, claiming it was just work-related. But her laughter while texting and the way she shielded her screen from my view told a different story. She also started dressing up more often, even when she had no apparent reason to. When I questioned her about her newfound interest in her appearance, she gave vague answers that did little to quell my growing unease. Then there were the nights she would come home late, offering flimsy excuses about having to work late or meeting up with friends. I wanted to believe her, I really did, but the inconsistencies in her stories made it difficult. It wasn't like Jennifer to be so secretive, and it gnawed at me. One evening, as we were having dinner, she mentioned our neighbor, Adam, in passing. Adam, who lives on the same floor, is a friendly guy, charming and outgoing, always ready with a smile. Jennifer's mention of him seemed innocent enough at first, but then she started bringing him up more often, commenting on how helpful he was, or how funny he could be. It struck me as odd because she had never shown much interest in our neighbors before. Despite my suspicions, I tried to push my doubts aside. I didn't want to be the paranoid husband who sees betrayal in every shadow. But the seed of doubt had been planted, and it grew with every passing day. The distance between Jennifer and me seemed to widen, and I felt like I was losing her to something, or someone, I couldn't quite put my finger on. I knew I had to do something, but I wasn't sure what. Confronting her without any proof felt like stepping onto a battlefield unarmed. Yet, doing nothing and letting my suspicions fester was equally unbearable. I decided to keep my eyes and ears open, hoping that maybe, just maybe, my fears were unfounded. Little did I know this was just the beginning of a journey that would test the very core of my being. The weekend rolled around, and Jennifer mentioned she had to run some errands. She asked if I needed anything while she was out, and I casually asked her what she had planned. She hesitated for a moment, then rattled off a list of stores she needed to visit. Something about the way she avoided eye contact set off alarms in my mind. I nodded and watched her leave, feeling a strange mix of anxiety and determination. As soon as she was out the door, I decided to follow her. I knew it wasn't the most honorable thing to do, but my gut was screaming at me that something wasn't right. I waited a few minutes before slipping out of the apartment and taking the stairs down to the parking lot. Jennifer's car was still there, but I noticed something peculiar. Adam's car was also parked in a spot it usually didn't occupy. I felt a knot form in my stomach. I walked back to our floor, trying to act casual as I passed by Adam's door. I could hear muffled voices inside. My heart pounded in my chest as I leaned closer, trying to make out what was being said. The voices were indistinct, but the tone was unmistakable. Intimate, playful, the kind of exchange that sent a chill down my spine. I pulled out my phone and texted Jennifer, asking how her errands were going. Almost immediately, I heard a faint buzzing from inside Adam's apartment. My suspicions were confirmed when the voices suddenly stopped. I stood there, feeling a mix of anger and fear, as I heard hurried whispers and footsteps approaching the door. I quickly retreated to our apartment, closing the door softly behind me. I was shaking with a cocktail of emotions: betrayal, hurt, and an intense need to know the truth. Minutes later, I heard our apartment door click open. Jennifer walked in, looking slightly disheveled. She had a forced smile on her face as she greeted me, but her eyes betrayed her. I wanted to confront her then and there, but I knew I needed more proof. The feeling of being in our home, the place where we shared so many memories, was unbearable. I needed to get out and clear my head. I told Jennifer I was going for a walk, and she barely reacted, lost in her own thoughts. As I wandered through the neighborhood, my mind raced. I knew I had to find a way to confirm my suspicions without directly accusing her. When I returned, I found Jennifer in the living room, scrolling through her phone. She barely looked up as I walked in. The air was thick with unspoken words. The next day, I decided to set up a small camera in the living room, hidden among the books on the shelf. It felt invasive, but I needed to know the truth. Jennifer's behavior didn't change, and I pretended everything was normal, biding my time. A few days later, I had to work late. I called Jennifer to let her know, and she seemed unusually upbeat about it. My heart sank, but I kept my tone neutral. I finished my work quickly and hurried home, hoping against hope that I was wrong. When I walked into the apartment, the silence was deafening. Jennifer wasn't there. I went straight to the camera and retrieved the footage. With shaking hands, I played it back on my laptop. My worst fears were confirmed as I watched Jennifer and Adam enter the apartment, their laughter echoing through the room. They wasted no time, kissing passionately as they made their way to the couch. I felt like a voyeur, my heart breaking with every second of the recording. Jennifer and Adam were all over each other, their clothes discarded in a frenzy. They moved with a familiarity that made my stomach churn. I couldn't tear my eyes away from the screen, even as I felt my soul shattering. The intimacy, the way they touched each other. It was clear this wasn't the first time. They made their way to the bedroom, and the camera angle caught only snippets of their encounter. But it was enough. The sounds, the movements, the sheer betrayal. It was all there. My mind went numb as I watched them, feeling every emotion at once. When the video ended, I sat in silence, my mind racing. I had the proof I needed, but at what cost? The woman I loved, the life we built together, it all felt like a cruel joke. I knew I had to confront her, but I needed time to process, to figure out my next steps. Jennifer returned home later that night, acting as if nothing had happened. I watched her, my heart heavy with the weight of what I had seen. She chatted about her day, oblivious to the storm brewing inside me. I responded mechanically, my mind elsewhere, trying to piece together a plan. I went to bed that night with a sense of finality. The betrayal was real, the evidence irrefutable. The woman lying beside me was a stranger, and the life we had was forever changed. Tomorrow I would confront her, but tonight I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, the images from the video playing over and over in my mind. The next morning, I woke up feeling a weight on my chest. The memory of the video played on a loop in my mind, a haunting reminder of the betrayal I had uncovered. Jennifer was already up, bustling around the kitchen. I could hear her humming softly to herself, and it filled me with a sense of dread. I knew I couldn't put off the confrontation any longer. The sooner I faced her, the sooner I could begin to process what had happened. With a deep breath, I walked into the kitchen, my heart pounding in my chest. "Good morning," Jennifer said, flashing me a bright smile. The sight of her acting so normal, so unaffected, made my blood boil. "We need to talk," I said, my voice trembling slightly. She looked up from the coffee pot, her smile fading. "About what?" "About Adam," I said, my words hanging heavily in the air. Her face paled, and she set down the coffee pot with a clatter. "What about him?" "I know, Jennifer," I said, my voice rising. "I know about you and Adam. I saw the video." She stared at me, her eyes wide with shock. "What video?" "The one I recorded," I snapped. "The one that shows you and Adam in our apartment, on our couch, in our bed." Jennifer's face contorted with anger. "You spied on me? You had no right." "I had every right," I shouted back. "I had every right to know what was happening in my own home, to know that my wife was betraying me." The color drained from her face as she realized there was no way out. "Brian, I can explain." "Explain!" I echoed, my voice thick with sarcasm. "Go ahead, Jennifer. Explain to me how you could bring another man into our home, into our bed, and act like everything was fine." "It wasn't like that," she began, but I cut her off. "Don't lie to me," I said, my voice cold. "I saw everything." Jennifer's eyes filled with tears. "I didn't mean for it to happen. It just did." "That's your explanation?" I said, incredulous. "It just happened? You don't accidentally cheat on your husband, Jennifer. You don't accidentally betray the person you vowed to be faithful to." She took a step towards me, her hands trembling. "Brian, please. You have to understand. I was lonely. You were always working, always busy. I felt neglected." My anger flared. So this is my fault? You're blaming me for your infidelity? No, she said quickly. I'm not blaming you. I'm just trying to explain how I felt. How you felt! I shouted. What about how I feel? Do you have any idea what it's like to watch the person you love betray you? To see them with someone else in the place you call home? She flinched at my words, tears streaming down her face. I'm sorry, Brian. I'm so sorry. Sorry doesn't cut it, I said, my voice breaking. You've destroyed everything. For a moment we stood there in silence, the weight of her betrayal hanging between us. Then Jennifer's demeanor changed. Her sorrow turned to anger and she squared her shoulders. What about you, Brian? She said, her voice rising. You think you're perfect? You think you've been the ideal husband? You're always working, always distracted. You never had time for me. Don't turn this around on me, I warned, my voice low and dangerous. This isn't about my flaws. This is about you betraying our marriage, our vows. She threw her hands up in frustration. I didn't plan for this to happen. It just did. And for what it's worth, it's over. I ended it. I laughed bitterly. You ended it? That doesn't change anything. You still did it. You still lied to me, betrayed me. How am I supposed to trust you now? I don't know, she whispered, her anger fading as quickly as it had come. I don't know how to fix this. I don't think you can, I said, my voice softening. I don't think anything can. Jennifer broke down, sobbing uncontrollably. I watched her, feeling a mixture of sadness and anger. I wanted to comfort her, to tell her everything would be okay. But I couldn't. The wound was too fresh, too raw. After what felt like an eternity, she looked up at me, her eyes red and swollen. What do we do now? I shook my head, feeling lost. I don't know, Jennifer. I don't know if there's anything left to salvage. The rest of the day passed in a blur. We avoided each other, each lost in our own thoughts. The house felt cold, empty, a stark contrast to the life we had built together. I kept replaying the argument in my head, hearing our voices echo through the empty rooms. As night fell, I found myself standing in the doorway of our bedroom. Jennifer was sitting on the edge of the bed, staring at the floor. She looked up as I entered, her eyes filled with a sadness that mirrored my own. Brian, she said softly, I know I've hurt you. I know I've broken your trust. But I love you. I want to make this right somehow. I sighed, feeling the weight of her words. I don't know if that's possible, Jennifer. You've shattered something inside me. I don't know if it can be put back together. She nodded, tears streaming down her face. I understand, but I'm willing to do whatever it takes, if you'll give me the chance. I didn't have an answer for her. All I knew was that the life we had known was over, and the future was uncertain. As I turned and walked out of the room, I felt a sense of finality. This was just the beginning of a long, painful journey, one that would test us in ways we never imagined. The shouting, the tears, the betrayal, it was all part of a chapter that neither of us had expected or wanted, but now had to face. The following days were a haze of silence and tension. Jennifer and I barely spoke, the air between us thick with unspoken words. Every glance, every movement seemed charged with the weight of her betrayal. I couldn't shake the images from my mind. The memory of that video seared into my consciousness. My home, once a sanctuary, felt tainted and hostile. On the fourth night, after a particularly strained dinner, I couldn't take it anymore. I watched Jennifer clear the table, her movements slow and deliberate, as if she was trying to prolong the inevitable. The sight of her, moving around our kitchen like nothing had changed, ignited a fury in me that I could no longer contain. Jennifer, we need to talk, I said, my voice trembling with barely restrained anger. She looked up, her eyes wide with fear and resignation. Okay, she whispered. We can't keep doing this, I said, my voice growing louder. This pretending, this silence, it's killing me. What do you want me to do? She asked, her voice cracking. I've apologized. I've told you I'll do whatever it takes to fix this. I don't think you understand, I said, taking a deep breath. I don't think this can be fixed. You brought another man into our home, into our bed. You destroyed everything we built together. Tears welled up in her eyes. I know, Brian. I know I hurt you. But please, let's find a way to move past this. I shook my head, feeling a surge of frustration. Move past this? How am I supposed to move past this? Every time I look at you, I see him. I see you with him. I can't live like this. What are you saying? She asked, her voice barely above a whisper. I'm saying you need to leave, I said, the words coming out more harshly than I intended. I can't have you here. Not right now. Her eyes widened in shock. You're kicking me out? Yes, I said firmly. I need space. I need time to think, and I can't do that with you here. But where will I go? She asked, desperation creeping into her voice. I don't know, I said, my resolve hardening. Go to a friend's place, a hotel, anywhere but here. She stared at me, her face a mask of pain and disbelief. Brian, please, don't do this. I have to, I said, feeling a lump form in my throat. For my own sanity, I have to. Jennifer stood there for a moment, as if hoping I would change my mind. When I didn't, she turned and walked towards our bedroom. I followed her, watching as she began to pack a bag, her movements slow and deliberate. The sight of her packing her things, the finality of it all, hit me harder than I expected. Once she had packed enough for a few days, she turned to face me, tears streaming down her cheeks. I'm so sorry, Brian, she said, her voice breaking. I never meant to hurt you. I looked away, unable to meet her eyes. Just go, Jennifer. She nodded, wiping her tears away with the back of her hand. She picked up her bag and walked towards the door. As she reached for the handle, she paused and looked back at me one last time. I love you, she said softly. I didn't respond. I couldn't. I just watched as she opened the door and walked out, the sound of it closing behind her echoing through the empty apartment. As soon as she was gone, I felt a strange mix of relief and sorrow. The silence was deafening, the emptiness overwhelming. I collapsed onto the couch, burying my face in my hands as the reality of what had just happened washed over me. I had kicked my wife out of our home, the woman I had loved and trusted, the woman I had shared my life with for 8 years. The magnitude of her betrayal hit me all over again, and I felt a wave of anger and sadness crash over me. I spent the next few hours wandering through the apartment, unable to settle. Every room held memories of Jennifer, of our life together. The pictures on the walls, the little knickknacks we had collected over the years, everything reminded me of her. I felt like a ghost in my own home, haunted by the specter of our broken marriage. That night, I barely slept. I lay in our bed, staring at the ceiling, replaying the events of the past few days over and over in my mind. The hurt, the anger, the betrayal. It was all too much to bear. I felt like I was drowning in a sea of emotions, unable to find solid ground. The next morning, I woke up feeling numb. I went through the motions of my day, but everything felt off. I couldn't concentrate at work, my mind constantly drifting back to Jennifer and the mess our life had become. I avoided my colleagues, not trusting myself to keep it together. When I returned home that evening, the silence felt oppressive. I walked through the apartment, touching the things Jennifer had left behind, feeling a pang of sadness with each one. I found her perfume on the bathroom counter, her favorite book on the nightstand, her hairbrush on the dresser. Each item was a reminder of what I had lost. I sat down on the couch, feeling a wave of exhaustion wash over me. I picked up my phone and scrolled through my messages, hoping for some distraction. That's when I saw a message from Jennifer. Brian, I'm staying at a hotel for now. Please let me know when we can talk. I love you. I stared at the message, feeling a mix of anger and longing. I wanted to reply, to tell her how much she had hurt me, how much I was struggling, but I couldn't find the words. Instead, I turned off my phone and sat there in the darkness, feeling more alone than I ever had. The days that followed were a blur of loneliness and pain. I went through the motions of my life, but everything felt hollow. The apartment felt like a prison, each room a reminder of Jennifer's betrayal. I found myself avoiding home as much as possible, spending long hours at work or wandering the streets aimlessly. Despite the pain, I knew kicking Jennifer out was the right decision. I needed space to process, to figure out what I wanted. But the loneliness was unbearable. I missed her presence, her voice, even the little things that used to annoy me. I felt like a part of me was missing, and I didn't know how to fill the void. One evening, as I sat on the couch nursing a beer, my thoughts drifted back to our confrontation. The anger, the shouting, the pain in Jennifer's eyes as she realized the full extent of her betrayal. I replayed our argument over and over, wondering if I had done the right thing, if there was a way to salvage our marriage. But each time, I came to the same conclusion. Trust had been shattered, and without it, there was no foundation to build on. Jennifer had made her choice, and now I had to make mine. The road ahead was uncertain, but one thing was clear. Nothing would ever be the same again. The days turned into weeks, and the numbness began to fade, replaced by a burning anger. Every time I thought about Jennifer and Adam, the rage inside me grew. It wasn't enough to just kick her out. I needed to do something to make her feel the same pain she had inflicted on me. I needed revenge. One evening, after another long and lonely day, I sat down and began to formulate a plan. I wanted to hit Jennifer where it hurt the most, to make her regret every decision that led to her betrayal. As I thought about it, I realized that Adam was the key. If I could destroy what she had with him, I could make her feel a fraction of the anguish she had caused me. I started by gathering every piece of evidence I had: the video footage, screenshots of messages, and any other incriminating material. I compiled everything into a neatly organized folder. The next step was to expose them, to make sure everyone knew about their affair. But I had to be careful. I didn't want this to backfire on me. I decided to send an anonymous email to Adam's employer. I knew from our brief conversations that he worked at a local real estate agency. I wrote a detailed email, attaching the evidence and explaining how Adam had been carrying on an affair with a married woman. I emphasized the impact this had on my life, hoping to appeal to their sense of decency. I didn't know if it would get him fired, but at the very least, it would create problems for him. Next, I turned my attention to Jennifer. I knew she valued her social standing and her job in marketing. I sent another anonymous email, this time to her boss. I outlined the affair, attaching the same evidence. I didn't hold back, detailing how her actions had destroyed our marriage. I knew it was a risk, but I wanted her to feel the consequences of her betrayal. I wasn't done yet. I needed to make sure that everyone in our social circle knew what she had done. I created a fake social media account and posted the evidence, tagging her friends and family. I made sure the post was detailed, leaving no room for misinterpretation. It didn't take long for the comments and messages to start flooding in. The fallout was immediate. Jennifer called me, her voice frantic and filled with panic. "Brian, what did you do?" she cried. "Everyone knows. My boss called me in for a meeting. They're talking about firing me." "I told you there would be consequences, Jennifer," I said coldly. "You destroyed our life. Now you're dealing with the fallout." "You had no right," she screamed. "You're ruining my life." "Just like you ruined mine," I replied, feeling a grim satisfaction. "Now you know how it feels." She hung up, and I could imagine her panic as she tried to salvage her reputation. I knew I had gone too far, but I didn't care. The anger and betrayal had consumed me, and I needed to see her suffer. A few days later, I received a call from Adam. He sounded desperate. "Brian, please, we need to talk." "There's nothing to talk about," I said. "You should have thought about the consequences before you slept with my wife." "Look, I made a mistake," he pleaded. "But this is affecting my job, my life. Can't we find a way to fix this?" "There's nothing to fix," I said, my voice ice cold. "You made your bed, now lie in it." I hung up, feeling a twisted sense of satisfaction. I had done what I set out to do. I had made them pay, but the victory felt hollow. The anger still burned, but underneath it was a deep, gnawing sadness. I had lost Jennifer, and no amount of revenge could change that. The next few weeks were a blur of emotional highs and lows. Jennifer tried to reach out several times, but I ignored her calls and messages. I needed to distance myself, to find a way to move forward. The revenge had given me a momentary sense of satisfaction, but it hadn't healed the wound. If anything, it had deepened it. One evening, I received a visit from one of our mutual friends, Sarah. She looked concerned, her eyes filled with empathy. "Brian, we need to talk," she said gently. "About what?" I asked, feeling defensive. "About everything," she replied. "What you did. I understand why you did it, but it's not going to help you heal. It's just going to make things worse." "I don't need a lecture, Sarah," I snapped. "I'm not here to lecture you," she said calmly. "I'm here because I care about you. This anger, This need for revenge, it's consuming you, and it's not who you are. I felt a lump in my throat, but I refused to show any weakness. What am I supposed to do then? Just let it go? You need to find a way to move on, she said softly. It's not going to be easy, and it's not going to happen overnight. But you need to start focusing on yourself, on healing. Her words hit me hard. I knew she was right, but I didn't know if I was ready to let go of the anger. It was the only thing that had kept me going. Think about it, she said, placing a comforting hand on my shoulder, and know that you're not alone. We're all here for you. After she left, I sat in silence, reflecting on her words. I had been so consumed by my need for revenge that I had lost sight of everything else. I knew I had to find a way to heal, to rebuild my life. But I didn't know where to start. The next day I decided to take the first step. I contacted a therapist, someone who could help me navigate the tangled mess of emotions I was feeling. It was a small step, but it was a start. I knew the road ahead would be long and difficult, but for the first time, I felt a glimmer of hope. Jennifer's betrayal had shattered my world, but I wasn't going to let it define me. I was determined to find a way to heal, to reclaim my life, and as I took that first step, I knew that I was on the path to recovery. The journey would be hard, but I was ready to face it, one day at a time. Weeks turned into months, and the initial shock and fury of Jennifer's betrayal began to subside, replaced by a weary acceptance. Therapy helped me navigate the turbulent emotions, and slowly, I started to rebuild my sense of self. The desire for revenge faded, leaving behind a clearer understanding of what I needed to do, move forward with my life. The first step was formalizing our separation. Despite the pain and the residual anger, I knew that a clean break was necessary. I contacted a divorce attorney and began the process. Sitting in the lawyer's office, discussing the details of our life together was surreal. It felt like dissecting a part of myself that I wanted to leave behind. Brian, I understand this is difficult, my lawyer Emily said gently. But the sooner we finalize this, the sooner you can start healing. I know, I sighed, rubbing my temples. It's just hard to believe it's come to this. It's a natural feeling, she replied. But you're taking the right steps. Let's go through the paperwork one more time and then we'll proceed with filing. We went over the details, division of assets, the apartment, financial arrangements. I wanted to be fair, but I also needed to protect myself. Jennifer's actions had already caused enough damage, and I didn't want to be left with nothing. When I got home, I found Jennifer waiting outside the apartment building. She looked tired, her eyes red from crying. "Brian, can we talk?" she asked, her voice trembling. "We've said everything that needed to be said," I replied, my tone firm but not unkind. "Please," she pleaded, "just hear me out." I sighed, knowing that this conversation was inevitable. "Fine, let's talk inside." We walked up to the apartment, the silence between us heavy and strained. Once inside, we sat down in the living room, the very place where our confrontation had begun. "I got the divorce papers," Jennifer said, her voice barely above a whisper. I knew this was coming, but seeing it in writing, it's hard. "It's hard for me too," I replied, trying to keep my emotions in check. "But this is the right thing to do." She nodded, wiping away a tear. "I know I hurt you, Brian. More than I can ever apologize for. But I want you to know that I never stopped loving you. I lost my way." "I loved you too, Jennifer," I said, my voice cracking. "But love isn't enough to fix this. Trust was broken, and without it, there's nothing to build on." "Is there any chance for us?" she asked, her eyes filled with desperation. "Any chance at all?" I shook my head slowly. "I don't think so. Too much has happened. We both need to move on." She broke down, sobbing uncontrollably. I watched her, feeling a mix of sadness and relief. This was the end of a chapter, a painful but necessary closure. After a few moments, she composed herself and looked at me with tear-filled eyes. "I wish things were different," she said softly. "But I understand. I'll sign the papers." "Thank you," I said, my voice gentle. "I hope you find peace, Jennifer. I really do." She nodded, standing up to leave. As she walked to the door, she paused and looked back at me one last time. "Goodbye, Brian." "Goodbye, Jennifer," I replied, feeling a sense of finality. The next day, I submitted the signed divorce papers to Emily. The process moved quickly, and within a few weeks, the divorce was finalized. The legal end of our marriage was both a relief and a heartbreak. It marked the end of an era, the closing of a door that I never thought I'd have to shut. With the divorce finalized, I focused on rebuilding my life. I threw myself into work, took up new hobbies, and reconnected with old friends. Slowly, the apartment began to feel like my own space again, free from the ghosts of the past. One evening, I received a call from Sarah. "Hey, Brian, how are you holding up?" "Better," I admitted. "It's been tough, but I'm getting there." "I'm glad to hear that," she said warmly. "A few of us are getting together this weekend. Why don't you join us? It'll be good to see you." "I'd like that," I replied, feeling a genuine smile tug at my lips. "Thanks, Sarah." The gathering was a small but welcome distraction. Being around friends, laughing, and enjoying myself felt like a step towards healing. It was a reminder that life went on, and so could I. In the months that followed, I continued to see my therapist, working through the layers of hurt and betrayal. Each session was a step towards understanding myself better, towards letting go of the past and embracing the future. One day, while sorting through some old boxes, I came across a photo album from our early years of marriage. Flipping through the pages, I felt a pang of nostalgia. There were good times, moments of genuine happiness and love. It was a reminder that not everything was lost. As I closed the album, I made a conscious decision to remember the good without being consumed by the bad. Jennifer had been a significant part of my life, and while her betrayal had shattered our marriage, it didn't erase the happy memories we had shared. The road to recovery was long and winding, but I was on my way. The divorce had been a painful necessity, a step towards reclaiming my life and finding myself again. And as I moved forward, I knew that I was stronger for having faced the storm and come out the other side. Life after divorce was different, but it was a chance for a new beginning. I was determined to make the most of it, to build a life that was fulfilling and true to who I was. And in time, I knew I would find happiness again, on my own terms. Months passed, and the once overwhelming pain of Jennifer's betrayal began to dull. Therapy sessions, conversations with friends, and time spent alone helped me process what had happened. I started to see the future not as a daunting, empty expanse, but as a canvas for new beginnings. One evening, as I was packing away the last remnants of my past life into boxes, my phone buzzed with a message from Sarah. "Hey, Brian, a few of us are heading to a new cafe downtown this weekend. You should come along. It'll be fun." For the first time in a long while, I felt genuinely excited about socializing. I replied with a quick, "I'll be there," and set the phone down, a smile playing on my lips. The cafe was cozy, with warm lighting and a welcoming atmosphere. Sarah and a few other friends were already there, chatting and laughing. As I joined them, I was greeted with warm smiles and hugs. It felt good to be surrounded by people who cared about me, who had supported me through the darkest times. We spent the evening sharing stories and catching up, the laughter flowing as easily as the coffee. At some point, Sarah leaned over and said, "It's really good to see you like this, Brian. You seem lighter." "I feel lighter," I admitted. "It's been a rough journey, but I'm getting there." As the night wore on, I found myself drawn into a conversation with a woman named Emily, a friend of Sarah's. She was smart, funny, and easy to talk to. We exchanged stories about our lives, finding common ground in our love for hiking and the outdoors. It felt natural, unforced, and I found myself genuinely enjoying her company. As we parted ways that evening, Emily handed me her number with a smile. "I'd love to continue our conversation sometime," she said. "I'd like that," I replied, feeling a flutter of excitement. In the weeks that followed, Emily and I spent more time together. We went on hikes, explored new restaurants, and shared countless conversations. She became a bright spot in my life, a reminder that there was still joy to be found, even after so much pain. One evening, as we sat on a park bench watching the sunset, Emily turned to me and said, "Brian, I'm glad we met. You've been through so much, but you've come out of it stronger. It's inspiring." I looked at her, feeling a warmth spread through me. "Meeting you has been one of the best things to happen to me in a long time," I said honestly. Our relationship grew slowly, built on mutual respect and understanding. Emily knew about my past, about Jennifer, and she accepted me with all my flaws and scars. It was a new kind of love, one that felt grounded and real. As the seasons changed, I realized how far I had come. The apartment, once a place filled with painful memories, had become a sanctuary of my own making. The ghosts of the past had faded, replaced by new memories and a renewed sense of self. One day, I decided to revisit the therapist who had helped me through the initial aftermath of the betrayal. Dr. Anderson greeted me with a warm smile as I sat down in the familiar office. "You look well, Brian," she said. "How have you been?" "I've been good," I replied, feeling a sense of accomplishment. "I wanted to thank you for all your help. It's been a long journey, but I finally feel like I'm moving forward." She nodded, her expression thoughtful. "Healing is a process, and you've done the work. I'm glad to hear you're finding happiness again." As I left her office, I felt a sense of closure. The pain of the past would always be a part of me, but it no longer defined me. I was free to build a new life, one filled with hope and possibility. Emily and I continued to grow closer, our relationship deepening with each passing day. She encouraged me to pursue new hobbies, to explore new interests, and to embrace the future with open arms. With her by my side, I felt ready to face whatever came next. One evening, as we walked hand in hand along the beach, I realized just how far I had come. The journey from betrayal to healing had been long and painful, but it had also been transformative. I had learned to let go of the past, to forgive myself, and to embrace the future. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting a golden glow over the water, I turned to Emily and said, "Thank you for being here, for supporting me." She smiled, her eyes sparkling in the fading light. "I'm glad I can be a part of your journey, Brian." In that moment, I knew that I had found something truly special, a new beginning, a new love, and a new sense of self. The pain of the past had shaped me, but it had not broken me. I was stronger, wiser, and ready to embrace whatever the future held. Life after betrayal had not been easy, but it had led me to a place of peace and fulfillment. And as I stood there with Emily, watching the waves crash against the shore, I knew that I had finally found my way back to happiness.